there is nobody doing the 9th or 8th or first grade. Is that correct? Okay, good. You can turn the audio on so that you don't have to do this. You can tell me. So that means that the learning task that I sent all of you this morning, learning task about the glass and the bricks on top of the glass, you have had a chance to look at it. How many of you haven't had a chance to look at it? That document that I sent this morning. If you haven't had a chance, would you tell me? Anyone here?
Me, I haven't had a chance to look at it.
Okay.
Me.
So how many of you have had a chance to look at it? Let me ask the opposite question. Is it just one person who hasn't had a chance, or others
Excuse
also
me, sir.
haven't?
I didn't have a chance as well.
Okay. Anybody else?
I
Same
read
here.
the half of it and half part is remaining.
Okay. How about the others?
I didn't have a chance.
All right.
Wait.
So one person has read half of it, and I still don't have a representative. I don't have a sense of the sample of people who have, had a chance to. I understand that it is kind of, if you send something in the morning and expect it to be done, to be read by afternoon, that may not be, that may not work. I just need to get a sense of how we can proceed. Anybody who had a chance to look at it, read it, and kind of think a little bit about it?
Yes, sir. I've actually gone through the document that you said.
You had a chance to think about it. Okay.
Yes.
So looks like there's a spread of people. Let me just look at the people. Okay. Anjali, should we wait? We have about 21 people, including me and you and so on. Is that roughly what we Tara may not be able to join. She's not feeling well.
I think 3-4 of them they'll join, but
okay.
It's okay. We can, of course, start.
We can also look at the people who come late can also watch the video and continue the conversation. Okay. So let me say why I sent that document this morning. This was to give you a sense of the learning tasks that you may not find in your textbooks. At the same time, you can still engage with the learning task, even though the answers are not there in the textbook. Right? So let me explain the learning task, the question that I was asking. Imagine a glass, something made out of a glass, covering made out of glass, 4 feet by 6 feet, on 4 walls, right on top, glass sheet. Okay. Now, if you put a pebble at the center of the glass sheet, it's not going to break. But you've put about 10 bricks on top of it, it is going to break. Right? You don't have to do the experiment. You can just do a thought experiment. That is, you can do the thinking in your mind and say, yeah, it's definitely going to break. Suppose instead of a pebble, it's a stone. Maybe it would not break. But as you increase the weight, at some point you'll discover if you increase it any further, the glass would break. Everybody agreed on that? You have to do something, shake your head and do this or something. Otherwise, and not say yes, sir. That's disallowed.
Sorry, Mo.
Yeah. Now, can you give me approximately what weight would break that glass sheet? How much can it take? How
If the
much weight
weight
can
of
it
the
take?
object is more than the glass sheet.
More than the glass sheet?
If the weight of the object is more than the glass sheet.
Okay. Then it would break. Any other answers?
Sir, I do feel that even if the object that we are placing on top of the glass, if it is dropped from a great height, then the impact can be more. And
Yeah, but you're going to place the weight gently on the glass without. It is going to be, you're going to put it very gently. But if it is 10 bricks, no matter how gently it is going to break. Just the weight of the object would break the glass, right? So I'm trying to guess. I'm asking you to guess the weight. And one answer is that if it is more than the weight of the glass sheet, it would break. Any other?
Sir, I would like to add that it also depends on the thickness of the glass, right?
Uh-huh.
We are not sure about the thickness of the glass. So if it is extremely thick, then even 10 bricks wouldn't be able to affect it that much.
Okay.
But if it is thin, then yeah.
Okay. So there is a correlation between the weight of the object as well as thickness. The greater the weight, the greater the chances of breaking. The greater the thickness, the less the chances of breaking. And I assume that you are familiar with the words negative correlation and positive correlation. Are you familiar with those words? Yes or no?
No, we haven't used those words exactly, but we have come across instances which
In your
relate to
textbook, or outside?
both.
Okay. So when X increases, Y increases, or when X increases, Y decreases. These
Yeah,
are two ways.
proportionality.
So direct and inverse proportions is what
Yeah.
we are familiar with.
Yeah. Okay. Usually in science, you say correlation, and in mathematics, you say direct, indirect, proportion, and that kind of stuff. Inverse. Yeah. What if you, instead of 4 by 6, what if it is 4 by, no, I had originally said 4 by 10, 4 feet by 10 feet. What if it is 4 feet by 6 feet? Would it take more weight or less weight? 4 feet by 4 feet. Would it take more or less weight?
Less weight.
Any disagreements on that? What if it is 1 foot by, 1 foot by 1 foot? Or increase it considerably, like thickness remains the same, and we say 10 feet by
Actually, it
20
also
feet.
depends on the pressure you put on the glass sheet, right?
Yeah,
So
no.
there are instances that if we gently place the bricks across the whole glass sheet, it may not break even if the weight is more than the
Yeah,
glass,
so if it is
because
spread
the
out, yes.
pressure is equally distributed.
Absolutely, good. Yeah. But my question was, what if you keep it at the center, right? So if it is like 10 feet by 10 feet or 10 feet by 20 feet, would it take less weight or more weight at the center?
More weight.
It'll take more weight. Okay. Anybody who disagrees that given the thickness of the glass is the same, it would take more weight? Somebody who thinks less weight? Okay. The correctness of the answer does not matter. Okay. And the question that I want to raise is this. This is not a question that you have come across in any of your science textbooks from class 1 to class 10, right? And if this is a learning task in the sense like it makes you think, and perhaps you would learn something. And if you actually do some experiments after this, if I ask you to go home and do some experiments to test your guesses, then you will be doing experiments and you'll be practicing your experimental inquiry. Now, if this appears in the examination, how much time would you need to do the thinking? After you have read the stuff, how much time would you need to do the thinking for this question?
1 to 2 hours, probably.
1 to 2 hours. Okay. This is important to, if you get a thinking question in the examination, you do need time. You can't do this in 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Okay, that's a point that I wanted to make. If you ask challenging questions to test the thinking abilities of students, you cannot ask questions that they are required to answer in 2 minutes. And if you have, let us say, a few questions of that kind, even if you get about 6 hours, there is a possibility that sitting in the examination hall, you may not think of certain things that you would have thought about otherwise, right? And you may, after you leave the examination, you say, oh, I should have thought about that. Suddenly everything will come to you. So there is a kind of chance that happens if the questions are of that kind. So far clear? So 2 points I'm making. These are questions for which there are no answers in the textbooks. These are questions which require thinking abilities. In this particular case, thinking abilities of experimental inquiry. Without actually doing experiments, guess what the results of the experiments might be, and then do the experiments and come up with laws. I guess once you get the results, you might be able to formulate the laws. But do you know how you can formulate laws if there are 2 or 3 or 4 laws going in different ways? The greater the thickness, the greater the weight, the greater the area, something maybe less or more the weight, and so on. There are many variables. Do you know how to formulate laws and calculate the actual weight at the end? This will be a difficult engineering question. This is the kind of stuff that engineers do using physics. Now, one important question that I want to ask you is, do Newton's laws of gravity and motion explain these results? Do Newton's laws of motion explain the activity of weight causing the breaking of glass, but not metal? Take your time, think.
Can you please repeat the question again?
Okay. You have studied Newton's laws of gravity and motion, right? In the 9th grade and perhaps in the 10th grade as well. I haven't looked at the 10th grade textbook, definitely in the 9th grade. So my question to you is, do Newton's laws of gravity and motion explain how weight or mass, if you wish, weight causes breaking of glass as
I
opposed to
think
metal?
it's the concept of normal force.
Sorry? Say that
It's the concept of normal force.
Yeah, but the answer that I'm looking for is yes, Newton's laws do explain, or no, they don't. And if the answer is, depending upon the answer, I will ask you exactly how the laws explain this. Which
I
laws?
would say yes.
I
Okay.
guess yes.
Okay. Let me ask, what do Newton's laws of motion explain? What phenomenon?
Forces and their nature.
Forces
And their
But-
nature.
Forces and nature, and how they cause what? Breaking or
Motion.
change of location? You use words like speed, velocity, acceleration. All of them have to do with motion, right?
Right.
And motion is change of location.
Change in location.
Does the glass change its location?
Yeah,
Sir,
technically
after,
it does if it
after
breaks.
it has
After it breaks.
become dismantled into pieces, then all the pieces might go into different directions. So, in a sense, it is displacement.
Yes, the pieces are displaced, but the object itself is not displaced. You see, in a collision, if you have two balls, one ball comes and hits the other ball, then the
Sir,
stationary
it
ball is
may
displaced.
not. We really cannot compare because its original state was like significantly different from how it was after the collision. So
Yes,
displacement should be, if we are considering that scenario, we need the same object in the same conditions at least.
right. So, are you saying that Newton's laws do explain or do not explain?
They do.
They do.
Sir, are we allowed to say that they explain the situation partially but not entirely?
Okay, good answer.
Yeah.
Partially, but not entirely. What is it that it doesn't explain?
That is why metal might not break, but glass might break.
Sorry, say that again.
It doesn't explain why metal might not break, but glass will break.
So there is a difference between glass and metal.
So change in material, it will not explain
Yeah.
what happens if we change any material.
Good. Is
Some
Newton's
parts
laws of
of
motion?
chemistry.
Yeah, it could be part of chemistry. It could be what is called material science and so on, nature of materials. And Newton doesn't say anything about those things, right? What is the thing that Newton's laws of motion explains? That you have heard the notion point mass, right? Have you heard the word point mass? That is when two bodies with point mass collide, certain things happens. This is there in the textbook. Do you remember that point mass? No.
Not the word.
Yeah, but the concept. See
Yeah,
that
we have.
the gravitational attraction between the sun and the Earth is calculated on the basis of assuming that Earth is a point mass, that is a mass with no volume, no area, and the sun is also like that, and that's the center of gravity. But we are not talking about point mass here. We are talking about an object with area, with volume, with length. And if you ask Newton, Newton would say, no, my theory is about things with point mass. To calculate things of breaking is not a matter of point mass, right? A point does not break because it has no volume, no area. Okay. So would you agree with me that even though you took the exams and did reasonably well in the exams, I'm pretty sure, do you understand the equation F is equal to ma? No, you had never thought about that. You learned to calculate, you learned how to answer questions in the exam, but you did not actually ask, what are these laws about? And point mass is a very difficult concept. Do actual physical objects exist? Not even electrons are matters of point mass. They may be very small, but it's not point mass. One more question. Do you think they apply to photons? You have heard about photons, right? Yes, you have. Okay. Do you think F is equal to ma applies to photons? No need to hurry. Think about them, and when you come up with an answer, tell me yes or no, and what your reasons are. The important part is telling me what the reasons are.
I think, sir, because they are considered to be part of a wave, maybe not.
Uh-huh. If it's a wave, it's not an object, right? If
Sir,
it's a
we
wave,
Actually, a
cannot be
photon.
sure as we cannot experiment on them. Even if we say yes or no, there is no practical way of proving or observing them, so we cannot really claim that something is 100% true.
yeah, but nothing in science can be proved to be 100% true.
In my
That's
opinion,
the
I
nature of
think
science.
F is equal to ma will not be applicable for photons because photons are generally massless.
Okay. Photons have no mass, therefore, F is equal to ma.
Acceleration and force cannot be
Yeah,
applied onto the photon.
Like it will turn out to be zero.
Also, they move at the speed of light, and usually we apply the law to, much slower objects.
yeah. But what you're saying is that if you use F is equal to ma, you may not get the correct results. But the point is, do Newton's laws of motion, are they applicable the way they are stated as F is equal to ma? If it doesn't have m, no, right? Okay. Now I'm going to ask you one more question. This is not a fair question, but I still want to ask you because you have completed your 10th grade, and some of you might be doing physics next year, or you may become physicist. Have you heard about this phenomenon called photoelectric effect? No. Okay. Einstein, became famous because of his explanation for what is called photoelectric effect. What that means is that if a beam of light is passed on something, electrons emanate from that. So what that explanation is that photons hit these little particles on the object, and it's a collision, right? And they move. But if photons have,
Ultraviolet radiations.
pardon me?
Ultraviolet light.
Yeah, whichever type of light, it doesn't matter. When beam of light impinges upon some material, very thin metal plate, then electrons emit from that. But if photons have no mass, how can it collide on something with mass and emit that thing? How will the collision cause that? Okay. I don't want you to answer the question.
Do you mean to say that it would it needs to have a force to collide and make and produce electrons? Do you mean to say that?
I'm not saying anything. I'm just asking you to think about this issue. I won't say anything. I won't give you an answer.
Sir, maybe we were initially considering only one photon, but when you consider a beam of light, it has
Uh-huh.
maybe trillions or more photons. And
Uh-huh.
when we consider the velocity and that maybe together they actually result in some amount of mass, which still is negligible, but in comparison to electrons,
Uh-huh.
uh, maybe there is some kind of effect being
Yeah,
produced.
possibly. If photons have mass, very small mass, what you say is on the right track, because when you have a large number of photons with very small mass, then the mass increases, right? But if photons have zero mass, no matter how many millions of
I
zeros
feel
you
like
have,
that
yeah,
electrolytic sorry, that effect does not is not applicable for mass itself because photons emit energy as well as the energy gives out a momentum. So both these
yeah,
get affected on the effect.
yeah. Okay. So your suggestion is that the way to think about it is not in terms of force through
Mass.
the ordinary Newton's gravity and motion, but through the notion of energy. Photons have energy. Okay. Good. So let me make your life slightly more difficult. you're familiar with the equation E is equal to mc squared, right? If m is 0, what is E?
Zero.
0. So do photons have energy then?
Zero.
Was Einstein wrong in formulating this equation E is equal to mc squared? Now, here is the trick. Just you cannot say Einstein couldn't have been wrong because he knew everything. He was like God. The move from studentship to a learner who can think is to say, yeah, even Einstein can be wrong. Your textbook can be wrong. Your teachers can be wrong. Einstein can be wrong. Newton can be wrong. So I raise this question just to make you feel, yeah, all these are human beings. Newton was a human being. Einstein was a human being. Darwin was a human being. I'm a human being. All of us could be wrong. So you must raise these questions. You must challenge all authorities. Nobody is beyond doubting and questioning. Okay. No, I'm not going to say Einstein was right or Einstein was wrong, but entertaining that possibility is important and looking for an answer. Maybe he was wrong. Who knows? Okay. Now, you can, now that after we have covered the basic ideas, you can ask questions about the exam paper. This is just to warm up, to invite questions from you. What are your comments on the question paper that you have just done? You've done your 10th grade exam paper, right?
Yes.
All of you. Okay. What are your comments on the paper?
I feel like the biology as well as the chemistry section were completely easy. Only the physics part had a few
Challenging
hard
questions.
questions.
Yeah. I'm not asking you about the difficulty or easiness of that. What do the questions test? When you design
I
a
think
question, do they test your thinking ability? Is the question I'm asking.
I think when we solved the physics section, it did test our abilities, whereas biology was mostly from the textbook. So we did not need to think more
Yeah.
diversely for that.
Uh-huh. So you're
so
saying
Same
that
for
for
biology
chemistry.
questions just simply ask you to remember whatever the textbook says and
yeah.
then
Ah,
regurgitate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
yes.
Okay. What about physics?
Sir, so I read your comments,
Physics, I think,
and there,
was a mix of both remembering and thinking.
Okay. Geet said something I missed. I
yes,
don't.
I said that I read the PDF, which was labeled as your comments. So you had said in that that the questions which are labeled as competency based or which test our reasoning or analytical skills, I agree with you on that because we have practiced all of them before, and
Mm-hmm.
largely even in the language that we have to write the answers in, it is strictly textbook based, or we have to follow a certain module which is provided to the examiner, and we have to stick with that. So really we cannot express our original thinking or analytical skills anywhere. I feel that, and I agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm. But there was a suggestion that physics questions test your thinking. Himaya, when you ask a question, show that hand up so that I can find out who is going to say something.
No, this time I wanted to elaborate on Geet's point because what the teachers told us while we were studying is to remember certain keywords. So,
Mm-hmm.
it just wrote memorizing those keywords, those definitions.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wanted to add to
Yeah,
what Geet
that's
was
a that's
saying.
a sound piece of
So,
advice when it comes
memorization,
to
that memorization.
exams. Yeah. Omkar.
Sir, I think the thinking ability is tested more so in the way the question is framed and how we can actually put out our knowledge of what we have learned in the textbook than our original thoughts. So the thinking is more based on how to understand that question and write the answer based on that question.
Even in physics,
Yes, in physics,
they
because
tested you.
biology and chemistry was straightforward. The
Okay.
questions there were straightforward.
Yeah. The physics questions required you to make calculations, right?
Yes.
Do you need thinking in order to make calculations? A pocket calculator can make the calculations, right? Does the pocket calculator think? So in what way is your behavior under examination conditions different from pocket calculator? You press the buttons, pocket calculator will give you correct answer. Were you behaving like pocket calculators or were you behaving like humans? There are two people whose hands are up. One is I can't, Anvi, and the other is Gayatri. Okay. Go ahead.
Actually, I feel like we haven't been prepared enough to answer different types of question on the same content. Whatever's been asked in the previous year board papers, we have been training for the same types of questions. So it was just to test if you have correctly studied those same types of questions, or have you only done the rote learning from the textbook.
Yeah. Suppose you were prepared. I mean, you took 2 years to prepare. The question that I want to ask you is, do the question test the speed of your calculation, or do they test thinking abilities? Those are different things, right? My question was, were you behaving like calculators?
Yeah, definitely like calculators.
So the questions were not testing thinking. And
Sir, I would like to add that
let me make this clear. You cannot call me sir. That is
okay.
illegal. Yeah.
Okay. So I wanted to add that even though the content remains the same, like the entire year for which we've been preparing, we've been told that be thorough with the textbook, be thorough with whatever notes you have with question banks. And the only part we find difficult or we say was challenging in the question paper is if the question is twisted in some way. So we've been preparing for the same format of questions, but if the wording or if the pattern changes, then we find it difficult to, apply what we have learned over there. So that's the main issue.
Yeah. So notice, I want to separate the role of the teachers from what the questions are testing. The role of the teachers in a school is to help you pass the examination and do well in the examination. And so the advice is very sound. And in fact, if I were teaching you, I would do exactly the same thing, because it is in my interest to make sure that you do get very high marks. So look at the previous question papers, practice, and do this at high speed. Do not think. That's a good piece of advice for the. So my question is really from the other side. What do the questions test? Do they test you're having memorized the answers? Do they test high-speed calculation? Or do they test your thinking abilities? So you were saying preparation and the teacher's guidance. Yeah, that's what the teachers are supposed to do anyway, right? To help students get high marks. But when you get high marks, or 99.99%, does it mean you are a thinking person? Or does it mean you're good at exams, which means you can make high-speed calculations and you can regurgitate?
I feel like the whole paper did have memorization as well as numericals and the calculator part, but the only thinking part was how you apply your memory based knowledge from the textbook to answer the questions which were given in the board exam. Nothing else was thinking based.
Let me understand what you say. So you have learned how to do arithmetic. You know how to do multiplication correctly. You know how to do division correctly, addition correctly, and subtraction correctly. 4 operations. But given a question, you should decide whether you should multiply or divide, add or subtract, and so on.
Yes, that was the
Right?
only kind of thinking we got in
Yeah. Which one
the
you should
application
apply?
of the questions.
Right. Does that require thinking or knee-jerk reaction? So let me explain. I assume that none of you can drive. Is that correct? You don't have a driving license. However, you can imagine what you need in order to drive, because if somebody is driving a car and there is somebody who is suddenly a bicycle suddenly trying to cross, you don't have time to think. You press the brake instinctively, reflex action. That's not thinking. That is, you act without thinking, conscious thinking. The same way, in a hospital, in the emergency ward, the doctor, somebody comes in with a wound, with some heart problems or something. If the doctor thinks, let me see, should I do this or should I do that? What are the considerations? The doctor talks to the other doctors. Let's figure out what are the chances that the patient would live? No, right? You have to act very fast without the conscious mind engaging in thought processes. So at the kind of speed with which you are supposed to function in examinations, the question that I'm raising is, are you thinking? Or are you behaving like a machine?
Sir, I do agree with Gayatri that mostly it is retrieving knowledge from our memory. And really, till this date, throughout all the examinations that I have been giving, we are not really given the opportunity to produce any answer from the knowledge that was given to us in the past years. So we really do not engage in any kind of original thinking or original thought processes. We have been taught to think in a certain way, write in a certain way, and if that format is not followed, then we are not given marks. So I do feel that original thinking or critical thinking is largely absent.
Hmm.
Uh, Even the two scenarios you gave about the driving as well as the doctor situation, it also applies to the memory of the person, because suppose the doctor, if he or she sees a patient and knows what the patient is suffering from, it's the doctor's memory. If the patient is suffering from so disease, then this is the only cure, or these are the only cures which would work on
Yeah.
the patient.
In the emergency ward, because they have to act
They
immediately,
have no time to
right?
think but to do
But if
whatever
it
is
is not
being
an
told.
emergency ward, but outside, the bunch of doctors figuring out whether the patient has cancer and what to do, what could be the cause of cancer, they can take time, 2 or 3 days, and talk to each other and figure out a solution. Right? So there is a difference between high-speed action on the basis of automatized processes, where you behave like a machine, and slow, deliberate thinking, where you disagree and you say, no, I think this is a better solution, and so on. There's a huge difference between the two. Vibhuti, yeah, you have your hand up.
Sir, I just kept it.
Vibha has raised the hand.
Oh, Vibha, I'm sorry. I can't read the name very. Vibha, yeah, sorry.
I feel like the exam is more
Can
testing
you come closer to the mic or something? It's your voice is, yeah.
sorry. I feel like the exam is more testing our ability to have intuition about what the examiner expects in terms of what keywords you have to include and the sentence structure, rather than really our ability to think through causes and think through the text. Because keywords and all, because it has to be very standardized in checking. the examiner needs to see those particular keywords. So thinking in general is very hard to standardize in checking, so it will be harder for testing. But inadvertently, we created a situation where students are expected to be mind readers more than thinkers.
Yeah. So you said something interesting. You said that to do well in the exam, you have to know what the examiner wants you to say. So a nice example of that would be in NCRT, I think, class 5, there is a discussion of the shape of the earth. And the textbook says the shape of the earth is geoid. Okay. So that's what the textbook says, geoid. So if I ask you a question, what is the shape of the earth? What's the correct answer? Geoid, right? Okay. Now step back. What does the word geoid mean?
Flattened at the ends,
Yeah,
but it
Geo means
flattened at
earth.
the ends. It's like a sphere, but it's a bit flattened at two ends.
The word geoid means, geo means earth. And so what it is saying is that earth is earth shaped. It's not saying spheroid. Okay, there's a difference between spheroid and geoid. Geoid means earth shaped. So the correct answer is earth is earth shaped. If you give something else, if you said the shape of the earth is spheroid, chances are that you'll be marked wrong. So it is very important to give the answer that the examiner wants to hear. So that's where your success lies. Any other comments, questions? Yeah. Who is that? Anvi.
Yes. So I wanted to add that even though like many of my friends mentioned that we have to follow a fixed set of steps or a format, something like that. But even though it is not very, it is not fostering our thinking during the exam, I think that format is pretty helpful once we finish the exams, for the rest of the life, because it teaches us to collect our thoughts in a very short amount of time and present them in a good way so that the other
Yeah.
person can understand. So I think
Yeah.
that part is also important, even though
Yeah. I'm totally in agreement with you. So arithmetic skills are important, and arithmetic skills be automatized. You should do this without thinking, instinctively. If I ask you the question, what is 12 times 5? You should know it immediately. That is how you memorize multiplication tables. So there is a case for doing that, memorizing and acting very fast. Because if you have to sit down and calculate 12 times 5 by adding 5, 12 times, then you will not be able to do higher math after that. So there is a value attached to that. So when you want to be a musician, you want to play piano, your hand should go automatically to the right keys. Because if you say, should I press this key or that key? You're not going to play piano. Same thing with tabla. You've seen how fast the fingers move when somebody plays tabla. Yes, that's important. But if speed is all you have, then the valuable types of learning are prevented. Yeah, Deepa.
I feel like the question here really is that are we trying to teach students scientific inquiry, scientific method, or science as we have learned till now? Because if it is scientific inquiry, that might not help students who do not want to go forward with science later. But science till now still has value in familiarizing.
One minute, let me turn this off. Okay. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
For compulsory education till 10th grade, science in general, till what we've learned for now, has a value in familiarizing the world for students and making it seem more inhabitable, I guess. So scientific inquiry and scientific knowledge till now are the separate things that can be taught. And I
That
feel
can be taught. Yeah.
As one.
Yeah. It is possible to teach students that, but again, let me go back to the question that I raised. Do the exams, the final CBSE exams, test the capacity for scientific inquiry? That's a question that I want you to reflect on. And if you say no, or if you say not sufficiently, I want to raise the next question.
Sir, I would like to say something on this.
Uh-huh.
So, for all of us, scientific inquiry, this term or its definition is very vague to us, because I do feel that when we say inquiry, we are not given sufficient knowledge, or we have to do all of the thinking. But in school or while examinations,
Mm-hmm.
we are provided with no kind, like we are not given the opportunity to question anything. We are given all the resources, we are given all the facts, and we are not expected to build anything, like for example opinions or anything. So we are given all of the material, all of the facts, all of the knowledge, and so it might be scientific, it might be related to a lot of data and facts, but it's there is no aspect of it related to inquiry or questioning.
Yeah. You are saying that the current system does not allow you to learn scientific inquiry. That's just the essence of what you're saying.
Yes,
Yeah.
and
That is true,
yeah.
because if I suppose I was a teacher in your school, okay, I suppose I were to teach physics, and I help you to learn to think, and then you go to the exam hall, and thinking takes time, right? You will flunk. And if I'm a teacher in your school and my students flunk, I get thrown out, because my job as a teacher is to help students pass the exam and do well in the exam. So if the exams are designed in such a way that they don't require thinking, and in fact, they actively suppress thinking, discourage thinking, then as a teacher, I don't have a chance. In fact, I would be irresponsible if I did not teach you how to pass the exam. I can, of course, after having taught you that, I can also say, look, there are a few other things I want you to learn. This may not be relevant for the exam, but if you are interested, I can teach you. So that's why I wanted to distinguish between what the examinations test and what teachers help you with. Teachers must help you to do the exams well. In addition to that, they can do some optional stuff not relevant for the exam. So let me give you an example. Take you have language exams, English exams, and I don't know if you have poems to study, and you're supposed to say something about the poems that you're studying.
Yes, we do have.
You do have. But suppose I give you a poem that you have never seen. It's a new poem, and ask you to write a review of the poem such that you can decide whether the poem should be published or not. That's your job. This is what reviewers do, right? And I ask you, here is a poem, say whether it be published or not, or published with revisions, and give your reasons for why. Why do you think it's a good poem? Not write what you have learned about the poem, but the ability to appreciate poetry and to evaluate poetry. Have you seen those questions in your exams?
No,
But
sir,
Not at all. Not at
yeah.
never.
So a teacher who
So there's
teaches
no
poetry,
such challenge given.
Kimaya, sorry.
Wait, uh,
Kimaya said something I didn't hear.
what I wanted to say is that so there's no such challenge given to us. Most of the, as Geet said, most of the material is just ready made. So, it's hard. Such challenges, then, for us, they'd be very hard. Since even in the class, the teacher explains the poem and we just note down what we learned. And then we just keep rereading it. So there's no thinking. There's
Yeah.
no option of thinking.
But notice that the
Yeah.
teacher is doing her job. it is important that the teacher teaches you how to get high marks in the exam. And if the exams are designed in such a way that you are discouraged from thinking, it'd be too risky for the teacher to do that, to help you to think. Right?
I'd like to add that in English we do have personal reason questions. They're called PRs, where
Mm-hmm.
based on certain chapters they asked on various outcomes. So, suppose if X had done something different in the storyline, what would have happened? How would it have
Yeah,
changed? So I
yeah,
think those, up to an extent, they do make us think or
yeah,
reflect, or at least reflect on the story that is
yeah.
there. But
These are the
such
questions that
questions are
call
still not there for science. For
these are questions
science.
called ERC, like explain with reference to context. But it is still a text that you have studied, a novel or a poem that you have already
Yeah.
studied, right?
Yeah.
But what if it's a short story, let's say a one-page short story, or a you know 14-line poem that you have never seen? That's a very different kind of question, right?
It would be difficult. We need a lot
Yeah,
of time to think for that. Then.
yeah.
Because we cannot interpret what the poet is trying to say
If
by
it is a new poem,
ourselves.
if it's a new poem that you've never seen, yeah.
Yes.
But ability to appreciate poetry is not saying something about the poems that you have already studied and you know what to say about the poems. Two hands, Geet and Anvi, in that order.
Sir, I would like to add that the only chance throughout our ninth and 10th standard that we really got to think and to question the given content in the textbook was seen in the political science textbooks. So
Mm-hmm.
there were two fictitious characters, and besides the main content that was given that we were supposed to learn, um, they were present in the margins. So they really compelled us to question. They posed very unusual questions in the
Hmm.
margins.
Hmm.
And we didn't really discuss them in the class, uh, but I really liked the questions that were given to us in the textbooks by the textbook makers.
Hmm.
So they helped us question what was given and helped give our mind some kind of exercise.
So the textbooks made you think.
Yeah,
Now,
just one of them, not the others didn't really have
okay,
it, but just one civics textbook.
what if questions of that kind, the learning questions in the textbook, what if they were also asked in the final examination?
Sir, I didn't
Will
get
you
your
have
question.
will you have sufficient time to think that in the textbook there were questions that were new and the questions made you think in the textbook? Now, what if the examiner gave you the same kind of task, but not one that you have covered in the textbook, but something completely new?
Sir, if we look at it in the perspective of the exam conductors, it would propose them with a lot of non-uniformity in checking the answers, because
Uh-huh.
every child would think in a significantly different way,
Yeah,
and it would be highly subjective. So we nobody would be able to give a proper module or answer key to the teachers, and then again the teachers would check in a very obscure way,
yeah,
and then there won't be any chance for the students to ask for uniformity or expect any kind of
yeah.
uniformity.
So
So
essentially the idea is that
it
every student should give the same answer, right? Same correct answer.
sorry, sir.
You're saying that in the examination, it should be the case that every student should give the same answer, which is regarded as the correct answer.
But
Largely, yes. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, because then again, like taking in consideration the current existing system, we still have so many critics, and every student is a critique of the system, of the teachers, of the examiners. And if we look at such a different way, like
Mm.
where the questions are not even from the textbook, then it
Yeah.
would be a really big chaos for the
Yeah.
conductors to handle.
To, to
And they
avoid,
may I add a few points to the same?
sorry.
May I add a few points to the same?
Yeah.
Even though they put some difficult or case based or high aptitude questions in the exam, it still wound back to the same knowledge we read from the textbooks. It was not very different from the main content.
Yeah. And the point made was that it has to be so in order to give marks to students. Because if there is a question for which 10 students give 10 very different answers and opposing answers, that it will be very difficult to give marks in a standardized way. Okay. Yeah. Vibhu.
I think that thinking or skills in general are not suitable to be tested by examination. And we need more smaller scale ways to test them in general.
Okay.
For examination conducted on such a higher scale, it will be very hard to test skills. It's very easy to test memorization. For 10th standard, not everyone needs to have skills in every subject because that's not something that they're going to pursue later. And later, these skills will be tested in workplaces and internships and things like that. So maybe we should instead ask what skills are baseline or what knowledge is baseline for 10th standard that they need in every subject. And for that, maybe memorization and rote learning is also.
Okay. So you're saying memorization, rote learning, and high speed problem solving is all that schools can do. I mean, that is what you're being tested on. And this is the job of school education, not helping students to acquire higher order thinking abilities. Essentially, that's the gist of what you're saying.
What I mean is, okay, so the word school itself comes from the idea of leisure time that Greek people had. So in a sense, it is a privilege that some people had to have leisure time to spend time thinking and developing these skills.
Right.
Right now, we do not have that. For us to have basic education for everyone that can be quickly tested, this higher level thinking and skill based learning is very hard to achieve because that requires a level of leisure time that is removed from utility in a sense. So, if we are talking about compulsory education that wants to provide a baseline for all students, if for a level, maybe we have to stop at memorization and rote learning because it is very hard to standardize tests and it is very hard to teach in a standardized way without sufficient leisure time and freedom from utility.
Okay, so the essence is that standardized tests require the correct answer for which everybody should give the same answer for full marks, not different answers. And that's a job of schools. The job of educational institutes is to make everybody think exactly the same thing. No, do not challenge the authorities. That's the gist of what you're saying. So if you set the goals of education as by the time the student has completed the course, the student should be able to challenge the teachers and correct the teachers. So let me briefly say how I teach, my personal experience, and also how I learned from my PhD at MIT. At MIT, the general idea was that if you cannot challenge your teacher and if you cannot correct your teacher, and if a teacher doesn't learn from you, you are a bad student. That's the first thing that I learned in my first year. This might be shocking for you, but that's how I learned. Until then, my education was exactly like yours. Memorize, regurgitate, give standard answers, remember the answers, do all that stuff. But my first year at MIT, I was confronted with the situation saying, knowledge you can get from other sources. The teacher's job is to help the student, challenge the teacher, correct the teacher, such that the teacher can learn from the student.
May I add to Vibha's point that she made right now? So I just wanted to say that right now, what the system or what CBSE is looking for is to make sure that everyone gets education and everyone reaches a certain standard point after which they can pursue what they want. So not let's just say that in rural areas, if extremely higher order thinking level questions or something like that is done, people which are automatically discouraged to follow learning or pursue education, will be even more discouraged. So what they're looking for right now is to include everyone, and then later they can branch off into whatever they want.
Yeah. So let me summarize what you say. It is a good thing to do that, is what you're saying. It's a good thing to make everybody think exactly the same thing.
Until a certain point.
Until a certain point.
Until a certain point.
You're saying in primary school, you cannot help the students to think. You should not. In secondary school, you should not. In your undergraduate education, you should not. And at what stage in your PhD, you should say what your teacher thinks is right. And by the time you have finished your PhD, you become useless. And this idea came into education system from the Prussian system of education that converted students, when they became older. They became extremely efficient soldiers who would obey the commands. That was the idea. This is how education evolved into what we have now. There were hands, let me see, Geet, Anvi, and Vibha in that order. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, to some extent, I do agree with Anvi and Vibha, but I read your comment PDF. In there, you had mentioned that instead of, at this present time, instead of reforming the whole or rebuilding the whole curriculum, we can add just one course. For example, the Think course was introduced to us in 5th or 6th standard, but I do feel it was restricted to only some schools. But similar to that, if we just introduce a small course, a small textbook, and it might be graded or like it can be included in our final percentage or it cannot be. For example, it can be treated as extracurriculars. For example, how we treat physical education, computers, arts, it can be treated in that way. But I do feel instead of rebuilding everything from scratch, we can add a simple course or a textbook, and teachers can help us follow that. And examinations, I feel that examinations on that should not really be conducted. The students and the teachers should mostly interact throughout the classes, because till 9th standard, personally, I did not have any experience with communicating with the teacher, because everything was just writing and then copying and then again reproducing the same kind of answers in the answer sheet. So I do feel that a lot of skills are still lacking in me. So maybe through that, the thing through that course, not just thinking abilities, but a lot of other communication skills can be built in the students.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask you this question. Why do you need exams? Why can't we have an education system in which there are no examinations, there are no marks, no grades, but only learning is offered?
Sir, I feel that I have been reading about this a lot. I mean, the whatever the education system is like right now, and the employment condition in India, it is largely because of how the colonization left us. I mean, even the education system, it is 60 to 70% inspired or based on the foundation that the British left for us, and their main goal was to produce clerks. I do feel that, and I read it somewhere, but the main objective of the colonial government for building the education and the employment situation in India was to produce clerks. And I do feel that we are still following that, because they did not want us to think. They were suppressing our original thinking and everything. And I do feel that we still need to work on that.
Yeah. There are two things that I would advise you to do. One, go read Macaulay's report. I mean, Macaulay is the bad guy these days. Everybody attacks him and says the Indian education is the way it is because of Macaulay. Go read the stuff and see if that is true, if that was Macaulay's intention. When I read it, I was quite shocked that none of the accusations against Macaulay was true. He really wanted Indians to start thinking, start having scientific temper, and so on. So he used the education system that produced the best results for Britain, and he brought it to India, thinking this will help Indians think. The other is if you look at the examination or the education system, let's say 40 years ago, it was much better than it is now. Is that the result of the British doing something, or is it the result of what we have been doing? So take for example, IIT exams. This is a personal story. When I was doing my PhD at MIT, the people who came from IIT, these were all people who did their exams before 2000, were all incredibly bright, capable people. And I was envious of their ability. And I said, wow, IITs are producing fantastic things. I mean, all the students seem to have high capability. But soon after that, I started noticing incompetent people who came from IIT, and more, large number. And I was surprised. Has something happened? Then I read an article by IIT Professor Vijay Sinha saying, when IITs introduced this multiple choice MCQs for their test, education went down. And in the entrance test using MCQs, they were selecting people who are not capable of thinking. So why is it that before that, you had extremely good IIT graduates, and after that, it became, then various people started saying, I'm not going to hire IIT graduates. People like Narayan Murthy and so on. So think carefully about the accusation that it is the result of colonization. Maybe it is not the result of colonization, but it's the result of what we have been doing after independence. Okay, I have 3 hands here. Anvi, Kimaya, and Vibha. Okay, go ahead.
So I wanted to address your question about why we actually need exams and grades. So I feel personally that there are 2 main reasons. The first one being that for some students, exams and grades are what gets them motivated to, actually study, get up and do something. Because some of them, get motivated after they get a good result, or they feel inspired to, work harder after they get a bad result. Also, the second point which I wanted to make is that results and exams set, a standard for students to be judged across the country. It sets a basic, standard which can be followed by everyone uniformly. If that was not there, then there would be no criteria to, judge the students' abilities. So that's what I think.
Okay, suppose let me ask you this question. In addition to being an academic, I am a painter. And I can help people learn how to paint, how to draw, paint in watercolor and so on. And if anybody wanted to learn from me, I can help them learn how to paint, how to draw. But should I give an exam? Why? I can help them to learn. And different painters in India can help their students how to paint and how to draw.
But then it would be difficult to, for example, when I give exams, let's say I can say what exactly my qualifications are, and that is what makes an impact in the world. Let's say I want a job, or let's say I want to appear for an interview. I will have to mention exactly what all my qualifications are, and for that exams are necessary.
Yeah,
But
for
yeah.
jobs, yes. But if you don't want to use painting as to become a professional painter and get a job, that's not necessary, right?
Right. So it's not compulsory, but it's a necessity that we need.
So why can't the employers set up those exams? Why can't they decide what they want and test students on the basis of that? So here's the case. I'm a researcher. I did not pass an exam in research. How have I established myself as a researcher? By doing research, writing articles, publishing, and people read my research and say, this guy knows how to do research. And this is how I judge students when they come to me to learn how to do research. I don't give them exams. I ask them to do research and observe them, help them a little bit. And soon I figure out some students can do it well others can't. You don't need exams. So I'm not asking you to believe what I'm saying. I am asking you to think about that possibility that it is the employer's responsibility to design their own evaluation methods and select students. It is not the school's responsibility or the university's responsibility. University's responsibility is to help students learn. That's an opposite suggestion that
Here,
I'm
I
making.
feel that the employer will hold the educational institutes accountable for conducting examinations
Yeah.
because it would want only, it would want to narrow down all of its processes and just hire a HR department to do all of the work instead of actually investing so much time, money, and energy into finding a accurate or like a employee who really works for them. So nobody would be actually conducting any kind of examinations.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
people would be just hired on the basis of the skills that they claim to have, but not actually a document to prove it.
Yeah.
And
So
also there
let me
would
give you
be
an alternative view. When I was teaching at Stanford, you know, I had been looking at also when I was teaching at NUS, I wanted to hire people to the department, and I simply did not bother to look at their grades, their, quite often not even the letters of recommendation because they were useless. I had to judge the merit of the candidates on my own. I did not trust somebody else's judgment on because they didn't have the same criteria that I have. Okay. And the idea that the 12th grade exams can tell you, the single examination can tell you whether somebody is good for medicine, somebody is good for engineering, somebody is good for other kinds of things. That's, or music or dance. I mean, these are different kinds of capacities. So question that idea that unless you have these standardized tests, employers will not be able to select candidates, then the employers are stupid. They don't know how to select. They should not expect the education system to do their bidding. Some employers may be wanting, McDonald's, for example, the kinds of things that are needed for working as a McDonald's at the counter. They should do what they're told to do, mechanical work. But that's not the same thing as doing research. Okay, two more hands there, Vibha and Anvi. Oh, three hands, Vibha, Anvi, Kimea. Yeah. Well, one of you can begin. I see the hands there.
So, more,
Yeah.
this is out of topic, but as we've discussed before, that exam questions they do not give us room to think, but maybe it is also because of the material, because in the end the exam questions they're based on the material or the knowledge given in the textbook, and in most lessons it's factual, so there's no room for exploring various possibilities or questioning. Like, suppose Rutherford's gold foil experiment, we were just given his observations why he did it. So there was no room for question, oh, why did he do it? What if he would have done
Mm,
something different? So
mm.
even I think the material should also be changed to something more versatile, so
Uh-huh.
that then
I
questions
agree
and
with you.
discussion
Yeah,
can take
because
place in the
students will not be
classroom.
able to learn, and if the textbooks are of that kind. But let me suggest this possibility. Suppose I become the emperor of the world. This is just a thought experiment. And I design my exam questions in such a way that they probe into thinking abilities. And I let the universities and schools know if you want to do well in my exams, you have to teach them how to think. If that is the case, wouldn't there be lots and lots of textbooks who will help students to do that? Wouldn't there be teachers who are trying to do that? Because if it is a case that you have to do well in the exam, naturally people are going to write textbooks. Another scenario, I design these exam questions. I also write textbooks. And I say, if you want to do well in my exams, you have to learn from these textbooks. And the textbooks teach students how to think. to learn how to think. I can send you some examples of such textbooks. So is it that exams are designed because the textbooks are like that, or is it textbooks are designed because the exams are like that? What is the cause and what is the effect?
It is like asking who came first, the chicken or the egg.
Yeah. So if you are the emperor of the world, Kemeya, what would you
Yeah.
do? Would you change the exams and then immediately after giving an experience of what the exams are like, write textbooks to help students learn to do well in the exams, and then provide teacher training to help students use those textbooks to do well in the exams? That's an option that you have as the emperor of the world. What would you do?
Can I can I have some time to think about this?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think I'll give you an
Any
immediate
question of this
answer.
kind requires thinking. These are not multiple choice questions, standard questions. They might require, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 months, maybe 2 years. Some questions are answered after thinking deeply for 5 years. There was a
Yes.
question that Tara and I were working on long ago. It took us 7 years of constant thinking and discussion until we found some kind of solution. Sometimes it requires that much time. Thinking is not something that you can do in 2 minutes. Vibha, followed by Anvi.
Yes, I feel like when we're talking about helping students develop thinking, we're only thinking about school. But if we're speaking of primary education here, we should also think about what conditions are required to help students develop these higher order skills. And it's not just schools, it's also a reasonable freedom from pressures and financial pressures and security. When we're only talking about students who have free time, who have uh, freedom from financial pressures and security. But there are so many students here and in India and in the world who have to work and who have to think about employability from a
Mm-hmm.
very young age. When we think about developing, like helping them develop higher order skills, it is very hard to not just stay into vocational training and very immediately employable skills.
Yeah.
So, when we promise a society which helps students develop skills and develop intrinsic development, basically,
Mm.
we are not only promising education, we're also promising economic equality, we're also promising so many other things, which is so hard to fulfill. Right now, the reason why our tests and our education is so focused on memorization and rote learning is because we're not promising a society that develops intrinsic development in students. We're promising a society that helps students get employed and become semi-functional members of society and feed themselves. Promising education and promising employability are very different things. Education comes
Yeah.
from schools, and schools comes from leisure time, as in the etymology. It is by definition a privilege and has been a privilege. So when we speak about education, we can have higher order thinking in some students, but standardizing it will be very difficult because it will be changing society itself.
Right. I agree with you. Um, Let me ask, what kind of jobs would these people from poor and rural area like to have? Working in a match factory or becoming a CEO of a prestigious corporation? What would they look up to? Working in a match factory, you don't require education, right? You don't have a degree. So training them in, doing that kind of work, vocational work, that's not going to help. So what is it that will give them huge salaries? Will the current examination system, what is it that those things are looking for? McDonald's work, mass factory work, or managers, CEOs? And there are many companies that say, I don't care about what marks they are getting. They should be able to learn when they come to us. They should be able to communicate. They should be able to work in teams. Their criteria for higher order high salaries are very different. So essentially, our system is designed to keep the inequality. That is, they need a large number of people who are slaves. they should behave like cattle. And then a small number of people who would go up. They'll be getting high salaries. For those people, would the current system of examinations work?
Can I push back a little? So the way I see it, there's no real malicious intent here, but the way our society is set up right now, there's bound to be two tiers of education. Even if we teach everything, even if we start teaching higher order thinking, people who are secure enough to actually kind of adopt this curriculum will obviously be able to go forward with higher order thinking. If we cannot ensure financial security and relative freedom to people, then we cannot ensure that they develop skills.
That's a very
that
different point. I completely agree with you.
Ability.
Yeah. So if there are students who do not have enough whatever resources to have 3 meals a day, if they are starving, a starving student cannot be taught higher order, cognition. So first of all, you have to ensure their basic survival and some well-being. You have to have, house to sleep in and so on, not live on the streets. So that has to be ensured, but that is not part of the education system itself. That is part of the government's work. And if those things are assured, that students do not come to class starving, that's what you mean by basic financial needs are met. Yes, I agree. So the question would be, if there are starving students in the class.
I also mean that when we say
what happened? Vibha, you switched yourself off. Something happened. Okay, Anvi, you have had your hand up.
Yes. So I wanted to add to Vibha's point. I think that the condition of the exam and the education system that we have right now has been specially changed to accommodate all of the students from these different and diverse backgrounds. If these diverse backgrounds did not exist, then obviously since birth all these students would be at par and would be able to pursue higher level of education. But at the basic level, at the grassroots level, what these basic exams like the 10th grade or the 12th grade board exams are for is to bring all students from different backgrounds up to the same level, and once they reach that level, then they can branch out and follow their goals or whatever career options that they want to. So that is the basic, I think, reason behind this monetization and this rote learning format that has developed over the years.
Something related to what you said, not exactly directly related. Let me give you an experience of mine in teaching. I work with an organization called Gyanshala in Ahmedabad. You can type Gyanshala and get some information about them. This is meant for rural and underprivileged kids, poor kids. In fact, they often conduct classes in, extremely poor areas. And I have been interacting with them, and I have often taught classes there. And when I go and teach, let's say I have taught 6th graders, I've taught 8th graders. One of the things that I find is that these students are highly capable and they enjoy learning, and they are much more capable than city kids. They're much more capable than, kids from wealthy homes. They have not been given a chance. And I have often wondered, if only I had students from there instead of teaching. I have also taught at ISA. And I find that the students who come to ISA do not have the, what shall I say, intellectual life thinking abilities of those students from rural and poor areas. Why is it that as they proceed from primary school to secondary school to undergraduate and so on, all their thinking abilities are systematically destroyed, whereas people who haven't been through that path they still have their intellectual abilities intact. I've given exactly the same same challenge to ninth grade kids and master's students. And the kinds of things that the ninth grade kids can do, I find that master's students cannot. Because by the time you move from ninth grade to master's, your brain has been rigidified. They are incapable of thinking. So is there a way to solve, to protect students from intellectual death, mental fossilization?
Sir, I would like to hold the society's conditioning accountable, because right now, even if we take the scenario where all of our education system is reformed and it is exactly how we desire it to be, where we are taught how to think in a way and our cognitive abilities are at its highest. But then if we look at the life after we have achieved all of the academic success, if we see from an employer's perspective, that person would still want a degree, or that person would still want a certification that out of the lakhs and crores of people, you have been ranked one. And if that person does not have that proof, then why he does not feel compelled to hire anybody? And I feel that we think in that way. The education system currently, the way it is designed, it
Yeah,
it thinks in that way.
I
And
agree. But notice that you are the future society. 40 years from now, you will be making those decisions. You will be the employers. You will be the ministers. You will be the teachers. So to work for a society 30 years from now, it has to begin with you. And how can you make sure that the future generation will grow in the right fashion? And if we continue with the existing system, you'll make sure that your grandchildren and great grandchildren, when you grow and you're 60 years old, your great grandchildren will be worse than the way you are now. They will be
actually,
machines.
I would suggest that the everybody present in the current world who is involved in the commercial activities of our country, everybody should realize that, I mean, there should be a reformation in the mindset that our knowledge is not limited to a paper, a degree, a certification. And if that is changed, then the students would feel comfortable in opting for a different kind of education system.
I
As
agree.
long as
But I'm
we
saying
are.
it is your responsibility to change it 30 years from now. I can see that you are facing hardships, but 30 years from now, you will be in that position. You will be the society. So you may not be able to change the world now, but you can prepare yourself to change the world 20 years from now, such that your
But it's
grandchildren.
still a difficult process, taking in consider our society, because most of them still desire to have specialization without those thinking abilities or cognitive.
I agree. But when you are 60 years old, your society will be people like you, right? So consider this: our society currently has all kinds of discrimination. Uh, so, for example, they prefer males to females in many jobs. And on the other hand, there are certain jobs where they prefer females, pretty females, to males. Our society is full of injustice. But to change society, the existing society is not going to change unless the future generation decides to change it. So there was a time, for example, when women had no opportunity to become engineers, doctors, scientists. Or if you belong to in many places outside of India, for example, if you are not white, you are not allowed to do mathematics or physics or science subjects and so on. But those things are changing because the society has been changing because of the people who are coming in. The new generation, change lies in the new generation, namely you. Kimaya, sorry.
On mindset, that on geek points of mindset, I remember this experience that I've had on how I mean mindset has limited people. So at my grandmother's home, we were familiar with the family that worked for various houses in gardening. And they were a poor household from a rural area, a rural village, but their son had immense potential. So he understood electricity, he understood physics, and uh, my grandmother, she did approach them, seeing him. She spent some time with him and she approached them, his parents. And they sent him to this special school where he was able to exercise his potential, exercise those abilities.
Mhm.
But when it came to finding a job, his parents, they were adamant on the fact that a secure job is one where one is between four walls and there's a desk
Mhm.
and a chair and you can sit.
Mm.
And you see, this person, he could have become an electrician, he could have set up electricity for a building and earned crores. But according to his parents, they said that it was an outdoor job, it's an outdoor job, and he's not sitting in some office. So they did not allow him to pursue it, and now he's
Yeah.
just working in some store. So
Yeah.
this
Now,
is
when
how
he
his
becomes a
parents
parent,
raised him.
when he becomes a
Yeah.
parent, will he do the same thing to his children? That's a question.
No, but no, I don't think
So
so.
change will happen slowly, generation after generation. But the new generation has to know how to change society.
Yeah.
And quite
So this
often,
is one
it'll be one or two people who do that.
Because right now only
yeah.
the middle class people have been bringing up the reformation slowly. It has still not reached the poverty level. They still have the same mindset
Yeah.
about continuing those dynastic occupations
Yeah.
like farming and etc.
Yeah. But when you become the middle class adults, when you are 30 years old, can you change things?
Yeah,
You
definitely.
cannot change society today, but can you change society when you are old enough and you are in powerful position? That's a question that you want to raise.
Yeah.
How will you, the new generation, people who are in schools now, people who are doing their undergraduate degrees now, how will they become change makers? How will they ensure that the new generation, how will they ensure, not us, how will they ensure that India is going to have Nobel Prize winners, researchers, educators? Of course, we do have a tradition of things like singing and dance and stuff like that. Arts, we have a very rich tradition, such that other people are learning from us. But when it comes to academic activities, we are still extremely backward.
May I please point out that the activities you just mentioned, those different activities other from aside from the academics, we in India do have foundations, but those foundations are very small groups, and
Yeah,
people are still not aware of these different foundations or what they do. So according to reform India, to bring up people uh, more creatively, I feel like we should uh, inspire people to research about these different foundations or create their own new clubs so that
yeah,
they can spread awareness about
yeah.
such.
Again, I would like to encourage you to ask, what can you do when you grow up? That should be the key. You should not say others should do such and such. It is in your hands. 20 years from now, you will be making those decisions, and you must have the necessary talents, ability to make those changes. That's a question we have to ask. How can we help the new generation change at least our country, if not the whole world, and possible change the whole world, so that the world doesn't face wars as we are facing wars today? If we elect despots, there'll be wars. But when you are doing, the voting, you can make sure that you don't elect despots who create wars. So look inside yourself and ask the question, what can I do to change the world, to change my country, to change my state? Okay, we were supposed to finish by 5 o'clock. We have gone beyond 5:30. So I'm going to stop with the Vibhuti, and then we'll continue the discussion in the discussion forum after once we post the videos. Vibhuti.
Sir, I just wanted to ask, how can
Vibhuti, your voice is not audible, so can you come closer to the mic?
yes, sir. How can we prepare ourselves better to become the change makers of our society that we will be building?
That question I will try to answer later in the discussion forum, because that'll take, lots of examples and so on. I think the Kaveri schools are trying to do that right now. And you should ask Anjali Gulanikar what they do to make that happen.
Yeah, school is working on that front. Pallavi ma'am is also here. So Anjali ma'am is also there. There are multiple areas in which they are, I think, are open for our children to go ahead and find out. Like river project is there. Then country coin for country is there. Like multiple projects are there in our school, which are like training children to bring the change in them as well as in society. So children are also aware of this project. Yes, children?
Yes,
Can you
ma'am.
name
Yes,
some other
ma'am.
project? Basically, think and inquire question. It's school like started this project from 2016. So nearly 10 years over for this project. Like school is encouraging children to go into thinking and critical thinking and giving them exposure and meeting good people who will guide you in that area. So it is all credit goes to school.
Ma'am, our school itself has an adult tinkering lab which
Yes,
encourages more creations other than only academics. And it's a very big project we have in school.
like in the beginning, I think Mo was also part of that. And then he was emphasizing on hands-on and minds-on things. So I remember him coming to the school for that also.
Vibhuti's hand is still up. Oh, the hand just went down. Okay. All right, it is 5:37 now, and all of you are, I'm assuming, part of the discussion forum. And any further questions, just send the questions and comments and whatever to the discussion forum. We'll continue this in the discussion forum. And if you have difficulties in, joining the discussion forum, or you are not a member of the discussion forum, email to me. But
I
make
think
sure that, yeah.
only
sorry.
Kimaya is part of discussion forum and others are not. So they
Oh,
might join in.
okay. Then you have to send your names and email addresses.
Yeah.
I'll put you in the discussion forum. This applies to both students and teachers
Yes.
from Kaveri. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
Okay.
today's discussion. I think children have gained a lot. Yes.
Even
Thanks
we
a
have
lot.
gained a
Thanks
lot.
a lot. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Yes,
it has
enriching
made us
experience.
think.
Yeah, it has really. Thank you, Mona. Really, it was such a brilliant session. I was like so impressed by the way the children were sharing their thoughts.
I was very
Lovely.
happy. I was very
Yeah.
happy. Yeah. The only problem that I had was that people were still calling me sir. That has to change.
Yeah. So I heard that 2-3 times, and I was just wondering how come you haven't asked them to not to do
Yeah,
so.
I did ask them a couple
Yes.
of times, but
When you
habit.
gave them the legal notice, they stopped.
Yeah.
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 Thank you so much. I think we should have
Thank you.
more of these sessions, Mohanan, with the kids. I can feel the thirst that they feel to have these kind of
I'm
forums.
happy to. I'm
I
happy to
have
do
a
that.
point.
Yeah.
Can the teachers also talk? We would also like you in the discussion. Don't just listen to us. We would
You
also
know
like
what? Today we wanted to listen to you, kiddos.
No.
Next time we will.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It should not be that you just listen to me without challenging me. It is, my condition is this. I'm happy to interact with you, provided you take the responsibility to teach me.
Yeah.
Good
If
afternoon,
you,
Monan. I have one thing to say.
Huh?
Here, I think this becomes some kind of action plan has to be there, I feel, instead of discussion only on based on this. Can we have some action plan on this?
Action plan, I think.
Otherwise,
Anjali.
it goes like whether war should be there or war should be stopped or not. It goes like this. It's my personal this thing that there should be something, some kind of action plan from with the help of students and teachers.
Yeah. So you have to
Change
begin.
some kind of
The action
society.
plan has to come from you. I am willing
Yes.
to help.
Yes.
Okay. From a distance, I'm in Trivandrum. So the only
Yes.
way I can interact with you is through Zoom discussions. And I can send you learning materials, all kinds of things from here. I can meet with you on a regular basis if you want, once in 2 weeks. But unless I see activities from your side, I'm not going to lecture to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you set up an action plan for learning, not action plan for changing the world right now. So
Yes.
what is it that you want to learn? If you want to learn how to think like a mathematician, how to think like a scientist, how to think like a philosopher, and so on, I can help you with that.
Yes.
And then you can use all those ways of thinking to change the world 20 years from now.
Yes.
So, yeah, all that you have to do is to talk to Pallavi and Anjali and so on, all the teachers, to set up an action plan. I'm happy I can negotiate with you. But the condition is ultimately you have to acquire sufficient ability to teach me, to correct me, to teach me, to challenge me, to tell me I am wrong. And I'll show you that you're wrong. That's the important part. If you cannot show that some of the statements I have made are wrong and should be abandoned, then I have not been successful. And you have not been successful either.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So we will continue this.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you so
Call
much.
me
Thank you so
sir
much,
just now.
Mohan.
It was really
Who called Mohan sir just now?
Who called me sir?
Oh,
Gayatri,
that
Gayatri.
no, that was
Gayatri.
me as well. It's sort of
Oh.
become a muscle memory right now.
Thank you so
Oh my
much,
God.
Mo.
You have to change that habit. Okay.
Yeah.
See you. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And those who are here,
Bye.
like if you want to join these discussions every Saturday, they are there. I'll send you the link with his
Thank you,
permission.
ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.